Well, welcome back, J.P.s World of Wrestling. I'm your man J.P. What are we talking about today? Well, today we're going to expand on a previous topic. Now, I did a video before where I talked about WWF video games, or just wrestling video games. And I talked mostly about the original WrestleMania for Nintendo, and but also pro wrestling and all that. Um, but later on, they came out with PlayStation. Sony came out with its first game system called PlayStation. And for PlayStation, they came out with a game called WCW versus the World. That was an awesome game. The graphics were not all that great, but just the way the wrestlers kind of moved around was a little bit more realistic body movements and stuff. But the game was kind of like 3D ish, where you got like more than one angle of the ring. And there were weak grapple moves, strong grapple moves, weak strikes, strong strikes. And it was just a fun game that flowed well. And me and Joe had a lot of fun playing that game. It was such a good game. Such a fun, amazing, fun game. And we really enjoyed playing it. We played the heck out of it. You know, the cool thing about that game was you could wrestle in certain game modes and unlock wrestlers. Like you unlock like boss wrestlers. And then if you had a memory card, you could slide that in and you could save those boss wrestlers and then you just had them on the game. And that was pretty cool. And I just love the the game mode options. Like you had tournament, you had round robin tournaments, and tag team tournaments, tag team matches, it was just a really fun game. And the only thing is there were no finishing moves. You know, that's the way it is. But the wrestlers had taunts and they could build up to where they were so fired up that you couldn't do anything to them. And that was kind of the prelude to what would become my favorite series of video games. Because then Nintendo 64 came out. And THQ came out with these. These. This was WCW NWO Revenge for the Nintendo 64. This is a really good game. It was an awesome game. Just the selection of wrestlers, the selection of arenas you could pick from. The only thing I don't like about this game is there weren't a lot of options. It was just basically exhibition match, which included a battle royal and I think handicap match. And then you had championship mode, where you could wrestle for a championship, which was either the WCW World Championship, the United States Championship, Cruiserweight, and Television and Tag Team Championship. And basically, you would just wrestle a series of guys, and then you'd wrestle the end guy. But the cool thing about this was it was kind of like NW or WCW versus the World, where once you wrestle the boss guy and you beat him, he was just on the game now, and you could wrestle as him. You could unlock him. But then after you unlock all the wrestlers, there was really not much really left to do on the game, except just play it over and over again. And don't get me wrong, that was an awesome game. And you could change the names of the wrestlers and you could change their outfits. But that was pretty much it. And there was no create a pay-per-view option. But then WCW lost its license to make THQ video games, and then they went to Electronic Arts, and they came out with WCW Mayhem, which was okay. It wasn't a terrible video game, but it wasn't as good as these. And I mean, it was okay. You could create wrestlers, and it had really good creative wrestler options, but there were these certain codes you could put in, and you could unlock pay-per-views. But like the selection of arenas was pretty good, and it was pretty good. It's okay. But then the WWF acquired the rights to create these. WrestleMania 2000. This is one of the greatest wrestling video games of all time. And what made it so great was, number one, you could create a wrestler. Number two, because they actually had creative pay-per-view options. Like you could do like weekly shows on Monday Night Raw and Sunday Night Heat, and then you could build up to pay-per-views. And then they even had create your own title. Like you could there's like a series of their belts. You could call it whatever you wanted. Like you could call it the Poopy Pants title if you wanted to. The only thing I didn't like was that the wrestler didn't come out wearing the belt. And the champion didn't have to be involved in a match in order to lose the title. Like anybody could wrestle for the title. Doesn't matter who had it. That was one thing I didn't like about it. But, that's small stuff. But what I like about the game is that for the first time ever on this type of game, finishing moves actually meant something. When you were able to get your finishing move on, your opponent was pretty much down for the count. You could pin them 1, 2, 3, and they were done. And you could taunt, and the more you taunt, the more you could get your attitude meter up. And once your attitude meter was blinking and flashing, you could do your finishing move. But like those other WCW games, weak grapples, strong grapples, weak strikes, strong strikes, you build it up, and just the way the games flowed was great. And then there was this game, WWF No Mercy for Nintendo 64. That was probably the single greatest wrestling video game ever created. Because not only did you have creative wrestler, you had creative pay-per-view, just the selection of arenas. You could actually have like the SmackDown arena and different arenas, and you could actually wrestle backstage, where you could put your guy through tables or your opponent through tables, and it was just an awesome game. The only thing that would have made it more awesome is if they would have had more like classic wrestlers on there. They would have had like some more classic wrestlers and classic arenas on here. That would have been awesome. That would have made it really, really sweet. They did have Andre the Giant is on this game. You have to unlock him. And they had like Shawn Michaels. And there was a number of unlockable characters on both of those games I just showed you. And those were some amazing games. Especially this one. Me and Joe had so much fun playing this game. Oh my goodness. We could not stop playing that game. We had our own storylines with that game. We had our own characters, our own storylines, and we just had hours and hours and hours of fun. Just amazing, amazing fun playing that game. And that kind of game, I can actually do pretty well at sometimes. Because if it's like an Acclaim style game where it's like push the buttons as fast as you can, I didn't do good at those. I couldn't push the buttons fast. I've never ever been good at pushing buttons very fast. But with this game, you don't necessarily have to push the buttons fast. You just have to be smart in how you wrestle, and those are some really good games, really awesome games. I really like those games. Now, later on, WWF came out with like certain Acclaim games, like Warzone and Attitude. Those were not good games. Those were the type of games where each wrestler had its own like combination. You had to put multiple button combinations to do an eye rake. Or the same thing with a suplex. The creative wrestler option in that game was awesome. It was like the best I've ever seen as far as creative wrestler goes. But gameplay was not very good. Same with Attitude. And then WCW later on came out with Backstage Assault. Horrible game. Just awful. It didn't take place in the ring at all. It was just backstage. Just backstage. Plus, Hulk Hogan on that game looked really, really dumb. He looked like a pirate. It wasn't a good game at all. It was terrible. But, nevertheless, those are some really good games. The THQ ones. Now, THQ also came out with the SmackDown games for PlayStation. I did play those a little bit. Didn't like them as much. They didn't flow together as well as the Nintendo 64 ones. And then, WCW came out with WCW Nitro and Thunder, and those were just awful. Those were like the epitome of like 12 button combinations to do drop kick. Just stupid game. I didn't like them. Horrible games. Horrible games. So, you know. Anyway, those are some really fun memories. Those are some really good games. I like them. Loved them. What are some of your memories of these later video games? Because I want to hear about them. Leave in the comments below. If you're new here, go ahead and like and subscribe. It helps me out. And I'll see you next time.